A standard dropper, like a dropper bottle, if you just drop one drop of a standard dropper bottle, it's 0.05 milliliters. If you have a 20% solution of DHT in a dropper bottle, that's 20 grams of DHT, usually, roughly, per 100 milliliter of the carrier liquid in the dropper bottle, which equals 200 milligrams per milliliter. Now I'm going to get to why this makes sense. If you multiply, like to get the calculation per drop of DHT in a 20% concentration DHT dropper vial, you would multiply 200 milligrams per milliliter by the amount per drop, which is 0.05 milliliters, to get the ultimate DHT quantity per drop, which is 10 milligrams. So in a vial of 20% DHT, a dropper vial of 20% DHT, one singular drop is 10 milligrams, roughly, of dihydrotestosterone. Now you might look at that and be like, one drop of a 20% concentration, 10 milligrams of DHT, not really a lot. But actually, for context, even 5 to 10 milligrams of transdermal DHT a day is enough to make a significant difference in a TRT protocol. Look, there are many ways to skin this cat on dialing in TRT protocols, and we've been through a lot of them. But sometimes you're on TRT, your labs look perfect, estradiol's in range, prolactin isn't high, total test is pretty high, free test is super high, DHEA is high, yeah, you got HCG in your protocol, everything looks right, but erections aren't full, climaxes are dull. And look, it's not in your head. It's in your hormones. Today, I'm going to break down why low dose, ultra low dose, like seemingly negligible amounts of DHT, yes, the scary hair loss hormone, might be the missing piece of your sexual function puzzle, and actually oftentimes is in my practice. We're going to dive deep into androgen receptors, DHT binding in the penis, how much that matters, and how a little bit of DHT goes a long way for dudes on TRT. Meantime, boys, look, Cortex Labs is a TRT guidance, sexual dysfunction resolution, performance optimization company got a range of different products ranging from mastering testosterone cypionate. This is a brand new video course that just launched. Look, anybody that's on test SIP, you're trying to dial in specifically libido and erections, you got to get this course. It's an hour long. I broke down every possible protocol with every possible ancillary and additional compound. It is live right now. You can instantly download it. Mastering testosterone cypionate for teenage libido and still rod erections under a minute, livecortex.com. If you need to hire me for a TRT consult, fix your protocol, especially around sexual dysfunction, or longer one-on-one packages, you can do that in under a minute at livecortex.com. Go browse all the different consult and coaching packages, and let's get started. I'm one of the world's most sought-out TRT coaches, and that is because I get real-world results. All right, so the bottom line on DHT is that it is the stronger of the two androgens. There's a lot of action that DHT has specifically in penile tissue relative to blood flow, erections, neuronal nitric oxide that testosterone can't really optimize, that DHT optimizes multifold. I've been through a lot of the literature on this, but here's one if you really want to study specifically the enzyme that produces nitric oxide, which is neuronal nitric oxide synthase, is upregulated and optimized heavily by DHT, more so than testosterone. Now look, people take mesterolone, which is methylated DHT. It's pretty close to DHT. It has a DHT-like effect at the androgen receptors, just not as potent and doesn't bind to the receptors as long as DHT does. And that is because DHT itself is not prescribable here in the States. It's prescribable, I think, in Europe, and it's generally otherwise hard to find. But if you can get your hands on it, DHT itself is the solution. Like I'm talking from practical coaching experience to people with problems with sexual function on TRT that can't dial in AIs, they can't figure out their dose. Sometimes it's just a little bit of DHT, and I'm talking about ultra low doses of 10 milligrams, which would be one drop of a dropper vial that completely fixes the problem. All right, look, testosterone is a pro-hormone for DHT. Okay, DHT gets kind of divvied around to certain tissues via 5-alpha reductase enzymes, which transforms the testosterone molecule into its more potent version, dihydrotestosterone. All the things we know about DHT are pretty awesome. It's a non-aromatizable compound, okay? So it is a non-estrogenic compound, which means all of its actions are directly androgenic. In the penis, DHT's action is much stronger than testosterone. It is the dominant androgen in the adult male erectile tissue. All right, let's talk about what DHT actually does for the male erection, and we're going to talk about ultra low doses of DHT in a 20% concentration. All right, so number one, DHT binds directly to the androgen receptors in both the corpus cavernosa and the corpus spongiosum. These are areas of the male organ that regulate both venous occlusion and blood retention, which are both needed for sustained erection. Now, there are two things that DHT stimulates, which is like extremely helpful for optimizing, gaining and maintaining better function, and sustaining male erections. And they are endothelial nitric oxide synthase. So the nitric oxide synthase, which is the enzyme that produces nitric oxide, and this is born in the endothelium. DHT optimizes that. And also in the male organ, neuronal nitric oxide synthase, just specifically in penile tissue. DHT has an upregulatory effect on these things, which dramatically aids in the quality of a male erection. And what this ultimately ends up meaning, okay, as it relates to practical terms, is stronger arterial blood inflow. That's where you get the steel rods. Like, that's where you get the fucking diamond cutters. It also means stronger, smooth muscle relaxation, which also facilitates the diamond cutters. One of the other things that the literature seems to point that DHT is able to do is optimize dopamine receptor sensitivity. This is huge because that contributes directly to sexual arousal. DHT also modulates the serotonin-oxytocin balance in the hypothalamus, which leads directly to better climaxes. The question is, before we even get to dropping one drop of DHT on the shaft, which is ultimately what I'd suggest people do with a 20% concentration, which, by the way, you can find in Mastering Testosterone Cypionate. All video courses moving forward are going to have sources. Question is, why do we even have to take it? Why does it even matter? Why can't we just get it from testosterone? And the answer to that question is, with testosterone injections, not all tissues convert testosterone to DHT equally. And that factor depends on the function of 5-alpha reductase enzymes in those tissues, which, by the way, decline with age. So regardless, even if you hadn't ever touched finasteride, as you age, you have less 5-alpha reductase activity, which would create the need for some exogenous DHT in some cases. Then there's, of course, finasteride or dutasteride in your history. If you're starved of DHT, man, which you would definitely be by either one of those drugs and some seemingly innocuous supplements, which aren't innocuous at all, like saw palmetto and other things that inhibit DHT. There's a lot of them, and you got to look out for that. Well, then penile and central nervous system dihydrotestosterone could be tanked. In that case, a modest dose of testosterone with an aging male with less 5-alpha reductase enzymes might equal a situation in which you're not converting enough test to DHT. This is where, you get these weird situations where the estrogen's at 30, test is at 1,000, free test is at 255, prolactin isn't high, nothing seems wrong, but the guy doesn't have good erections and his libido's kind of hit or miss. TRT, raises systemic testosterone and has a profound effect at the muscle tissue in terms of anabolism and protein synthesis. I think that's it's kind of always going to happen. You're just injecting directly testosterone into the system, but it's not necessarily going to convert enough to local DHT. You got test, which has a systemic effect on the tissues and helps anabolism and the brain and energy and all these kinds of things, but not necessarily as much as you need of local DHT, and specifically where it counts: the brain and the penis. And as you guys know, and as I've alluded to, and I'm going to continue to hammer home, high estrogen from testosterone can also blunt the sexual response, even if you have high testosterone. And DHT works as a countermeasure, right? A counterbalance to estradiol. This is one of the reasons we make DHT. We make DHT for, tissue-specific actions, but DHT also has another effect where it kind of inhibits some of the gene expression of estrogen, which is useful. It's all about balance. The body understands what to do. All that said, if you're on TRT and you've tried every different regimen and you're still in a place where specifically erections aren't where they need to be, even in the presence of a little bit of Cialis, sometimes just topical standalone, which is pure DHT, solves the problem completely. Right? Because maybe you're aging, you have a little less 5-alpha reductase, maybe you had taken finasteride, maybe you're taking some supplements and you don't even know that they're inhibiting DHT synthesis to some degree, or for some reason or other, you're not converting enough of your tested DHT via injections. Well, then a mere 5 to 15 milligrams, right? And we'll couch it just at 10 milligrams because that's what you're getting per drop of a 20% concentration DHT gel, solves the problem completely. I've seen this over and over and over and over again. That 20% stuff is so fucking powerful. And some people need more of it. Some people need 0.25 milliliters every other day, every third day kind of thing. And I think there are differences between people in how they require DHT and how much DHT they can tolerate before it starts to inhibit estrogen too much. But like what I found is that most people, especially with the high concentration DHT gel, they don't need a lot of it at all. Talking about a few drops sometimes, 2 drops sometimes, and 1 drop a day sometimes is enough. The way that I would dose in the context of TRT and trying to fix libido and erections when everything else is right and you've tried a lot of protocols and don't want to go through the whole list of exhausting, various different protocols, is to drop 1 drop, starting at 1 drop in addition to your TRT protocol. You don't change anything with testosterone, HGG, DHT. You should have all those things in your protocol. You drop 1 drop, okay, which is 10 milligrams of DHT. It's transdermal. It's going to absorb right through the skin on the shaft of the male organ per day. But here's what's really beneficial about adding that to a TRT protocol in this context of subpar erections. It's a low dose, okay? So you get minimal DHT spillover in other areas of your body, which can ultimately end up reducing subcutaneous tissue in your scalp, which leads to hair loss. So with an ultra low dose of DHT, you get minimal to no hair loss. If you have a local DHT application, like just applying it directly to the male organ, well, then you get more targeted DHT to penile tissue. If you apply some DHT to the male organ, obviously because it's a dry compound, you get no aromatization. So there's no estrogenic risk in doing that. And DHT itself is not liver toxic, right? So, and especially at low doses, whatever effect on the processing of DHT to get it out of your system ultimately is going to be negligible. So if you think of TRT, think of testosterone itself as the engine, but DHT as like the supercharger of libido, climax, and erectile quality. You don't need high doses, okay? This is why 1 drop usually does the trick for some people. You just need restoration of what you're not getting. And the greatest part is you can go from decent or subpar to fully fucking functional when it comes to erections and sexual function with no AI, no grams of testosterone, no changes in injection frequency, all the stuff that people try to assert works, which usually doesn't. But you fix the problem just understanding androgen balance. Let's end with a caveat. The caveat is with DHT, especially a 20% concentration gel, if you use too much of it, you're going to block estrogen at the gene expression level too much, and it's going to feel a little bit like you're taking an AI, which for some people is going to do one primarily negative thing. That is going to inhibit the brain side of libido, right? It's going to start killing your libido. Yes, it is the case, especially with high potency DHT, just exogenous DHT gel, that you could nuke your libido by taking too much of it. Yes, DHT is amazing. Yes, you need it. It's got all this action at the penile tissue. It's got this upregulatory aspect on endothelial nitric oxide synthase and neuronal nitric oxide synthase. Again, the enzyme that produces nitric oxide. This happens inside the male organ. But if you take too much of it, you could void the effects that you're trying to get via massive blocking of estrogen at the gene expression level. So that's why it's always wise not to look at DHT and be like, oh, cool, DHT, it does all these powerful things. Let me just load a lot of it in. That should work. just like anything else, there's a balance. You should start as low as you can. And 10 milligrams and a highly absorbable transdermal solution that's 20% in total, 10 milligrams per drop roughly, it's usually enough for people. Again, I can't, at this point, I can't, point you to a place to get, 20% DHT gel, but I can say that you should get Mastering Testosterone Cypionate, the course, and all the courses moving forward, because all of those will include resources. On that note, Mastering Testosterone Cypionate has just launched. It is a video course laying out every possible protocol with testosterone cypionate. Look, cypionate's hard to dial in. You can't just inject the stuff and suddenly you're dialed in, specifically with libido and erections. You're going to have anabolism, you're going to be muscular, you're going to have energy. Those things are going to improve regardless. That's just what testosterone does. But dialing in cypionate, which is a harder ester to dial in than, say, prop or cream, takes a degree of surgical precision, sometimes the addition of DHT ancillaries, sometimes the addition of proviron, but specifically strategic dose modifications that actually make an impact on the sexual system. I've been dialing people in on testosterone cypionate for years. I created a video course on it, and you can get it literally in under a minute with an instant download right now at livecortex.com or down in the description. If you need to hire me, boys, this is busy season, but I still have slots open for either a one-off call consult with you regarding TRT and fixing your protocol specifically related to libido and erections, or if some of this stuff has been going on for a while, we're going to need some time. A month at the very least, 3 months, 6 months. For those of you serious individuals that have the budget, let's work together. You're going to have me at your beck and call for a considerable period of time to fully dial you in on HRT, HRT Plus, whatever it is you need. I'm there for you. Book me in under a minute, livecortex.com. All right, we're done here. An absolute pleasure hanging out with you. Hope you guys have a great day. Hope you're having a great week so far. Do 2 things for me if you would. Like the video. It makes a huge difference. Doesn't take you long. And actually means like a lot. Like I didn't realize how much likes count for YouTube showing your content to other people. If you want to do me a favor, just hit the like button. Sub to the channel. Many more breakdowns on TRT, HRT, DHT, ancillaries, everything you can think of, specifically sexual function, previous and forever in the time continuum. Love to have you as a sub. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on. Hope the rest of your day goes swimmingly. And I'll talk to you boys on the next one.